Guys, welcome back. Today I've got, he's a jack of all trades in my opinion, but he is running a really cool company, well, multiple companies, Fit.co and Fit Insider, but he's also been on the coaching side. He's been on the facility ownership side. He's played in tech and fitness and health and wellness. Anthony Vennare is his name. And Anthony, can you just give us a quick introduction of sort of how you view the fitness industry and kind of what you're trying to build right now?
Yes, I appreciate you having me on. And like you said, I've been in kind of every aspect. My brother and I, who co-own all the businesses together, we've always said that our unique kind of position is that we've gone from, being at the YMCA's, owning facilities, running programming, selling, coaching, tech, everything else. Right now, we're building Fit and Fit Insider. Fit is a consumer-facing platform for health and fitness discovery. So think Yelp, Infatuation, Thrillist, Eater, any of the things you've ever gone to, like found a restaurant or a bar or nightlife. We've built that for fitness. It started out just as content. We're based here in Pittsburgh, PA, and we started here. Now we're in 31 markets across the US, UK, and now Australia and Canada. And it started out as content. And now we just got an investment from MindBody, and we're focused on building out the booking. So we want it to be discovery to booking, just making fitness more accessible that way. And then what you and I talk about the most is Fit Insider. Fit Insider started as a newsletter. I started out sending out a newsletter about what I thought on the space because I had the experience of being both on the facility and ownership side as well as the tech side. And now it's a podcast, a full platform, in a weekly newsletter that Joe and I run together. And it's all about the business of fitness or wellness. What does it mean to own a business in the space today? So that's, whether you own a gym, you own a coaching platform, you own an app, if you have a technology, you sell wellness products, whatever it is, we evaluate the scope of what they are, what they're doing, and look at what's happening in the industry and try to kind of lend some insight. Because in industries like media or tech or just about anything out there, there's these massive businesses built around the business of them, but there's very limiting ones. The only ones you really exist right now are club industry and IRSA, and those were 50-year-old businesses that used to be only around when it was about selling like step boxes to YMCA's, and it's just a much different business now, and we're trying to be that leading edge of the next phase of what's happening.
So I want to put some things in context for our listeners. When Anthony says 31 markets, he literally means that there are 31 different websites in cities around the world that have all kinds of very local content inside of the websites, local business conversations, events, etc. So you're not just going to some one-page website. You're going to 31 different websites around the world. On the insider piece, when you guys think about putting content out, what do you want people to get from it? So what is it news? Is it analysis? What are you trying to teach, anybody in the fitness or wellness space?
Mm-hmm. It's a mixture. So the main point of every email and podcast, every email, let's break it down in two ways. The main point is taking a theory or analysis of something that's going on and putting my spin on it, or our spin on it, since I work on it with my brother together. And that's the main component. It's the beginning of it. It's, the meat of the email. And then we call out, news and call out a few specific things and give some commentary around that, link to other important factors that we're reading, talk about, hiring and money moves, anything that's really in the space that's unique. And what we're trying to kind of get across on the email is, what we think is a very common sense, matter of fact approach to what's happening. Fitness right now has gone in wellness, fitness and wellness, when we say both, like people are investing millions of dollars into apps that tell you your horoscope. Meanwhile, obesity rates are growing. So it's like, what is happening in the space that somebody that's a wellness investor is putting $5 million into an app that tells you your horoscope, but they're not backing things that might have an actual impact on fitness? And that approach, having been on both sides, we look at it and say, what's wrong, what's right, what do we think, and how's it going? And it's just trying to share that information that we see from our lens. And then the podcast that Joe hosts, it's really about talking to kind of executive founders, investors in the space that are sharing knowledge about why they started their company, what it's doing, and not just their background and their story about how they got started, but more importantly, what are they doing? Why is it working? And what does that mean for the space? Kind of dig into the specifics around like, cool, we're glad you started this company, but what does it actually mean and what are you doing?
Why do you think investors, I want to phrase this the right way. Do you think investors are trying to put money towards the biggest impactful things, or do you think investors are trying to put money towards the most scalable things?
I honestly don't think it's either, because if you truly look at the businesses and you understand them, they're not impactful and they're not scalable. They're only scalable by being propped up by VC dollars.
Mm.
On the scalable metric, they're not profitable, they're not making money, and they're not something that even at scale, like a ClassPass, for example, great company, they've grown a ton. Still, at the scale that they've gotten, even before all of the COVID stuff, it's just more and more money, and it's, in my opinion, devaluing some of the product that's out there for fitness. So I don't think that they're doing either, and that's why we're interested in going deep into that space, because they're not building for what we think of any of the right reasons. And I think it comes from a lens of not understanding what it means to own a gym, what it means to be a trainer, what it means to be a coach or a strength coach, and taking that full scale all the way up. Because literally Joe and I have done from working at a YMCA and then running our gym to creating programs to, so many other things. We've been in every aspect of the space and we know what each one represents. And I don't think that if you take the lens of tech and Silicon Valley and a ton of that stuff, and some of it obviously being nonsense, and spinning that to the lens of fitness, it just doesn't translate. And the people in those areas, for them, wellness is, $10 home delivered smoothies, but that doesn't translate to anyone else outside of a few coastal cities. Like, there's so many things that just don't make sense for the average person. And more importantly, childhood obesity, adult obesity, health risks because of the weight, the health, how many times people are working out, all of that stuff. It just doesn't translate to how much money and time is getting invested in certain things.
Interesting. What do you think could be impactful to helping obesity rates that could potentially also be investable? And don't name companies, just kind of name global ideas.
One thing that Joe and I have been talking about a lot is this whole accountability of training. If you take, True Coach is doing some of it, Future is kind of doing it with their app and text platform, some type of way to make training and fitness accessible and affordable, and add the accountability of a trainer or manager or nutrition of some aspect. But it's also a lot of education things, just generally what's good for you, what's not. There's so much nonsense out there, and what these consumers can rely on, and the basics of, move more, eat less. How does that work in those specific things? And the other one that we talked about a little bit, but Joe and I are kind of working on now, is like envisioning what the, YMCA's, JCC's, other businesses could be like in the modern era of what fitness is, like comparing them to the studios and the gyms, and how could they reevaluate what they do to help childhood obesity and help other things and expand their programming. Because, if you think about even what now is spas and what are they? The steam room, like there's some bathhouses, all of that's now considered wellness, and these massive brands that are raising tens of millions of dollars to open these bathhouses when steam rooms were always in YMCA. Yeah. If you take, there's that space, I think is a huge opportunity. And Joe specifically is working on a massive kind of like report around how we think that could go about, but that's something that's already there. It could be done better. There's just so many things that are so common sense and basic that are already existing that could be changed a little bit. It's not about this new amazing AI app that tracks your movements and it has nothing to do with that. It's like, get people outside, get people moving, get them eating healthier, get them access to certain things, and teach them a little bit, and then build on that scale.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I've seen so many people who went from no motivation, no inspiration in a gym setting to absolutely different livelihoods because they found movement, they found progress, etc. It's always it depends on the type of person, but that idea is massive. How can we get people inspired to move and to eat better? I agree with you. I think it's going to come down more between the ears and more on the accountability side than, the newest piece of equipment or, some specific tech app. Now, if tech can help connect people to accountability. I'm with you there. When you guys think about analyzing, and let me go to our audience for a minute. When you think about analyzing a micro gym or a coaching business, what would some of the big things you guys would look for in terms of this is a quality coaching business? What are some of the things you'd look for?
Yeah. If you think about it as a whole picture from like an actual location-based, offering, it's the programming itself. Is it scalable? Not in terms of how many locations they could have, but how much does that scale within the person? So if I go to a gym, what is the offering when I first get there? How does it, work with me all the way through my progress? What does that mean? It's also the business side of it. How are they running their customer acquisition costs? Do they even have one? What is their marketing spend? Do they even have one? What is their actual, numbers and the basics around how they operate their business? Why are they spending money the way they are? Is it a, lifestyle personal business? Is it an actual, thing that's growing? And if you just look at those, that evaluates most businesses. And honestly, I would say that a lot of the people that we've looked at don't even have that.
Yeah, I agree.
And, there's a lot of weird ego slash, passion involved in the fitness space that, they're not evaluating things the right way. They don't take a good look in the mirror and say, this is good, this is bad. And they also don't think about it as a business. They think about it as something that they just do because that's what they do. So we would look for those things and then start to think at like, marketing, for example, in the community side. Everyone, especially the CrossFits and other spaces, they talk about community, but community isn't being friends with your members. Community is managing the people you have, adding value beyond being their friend. It's great. Like when, we opened our gym, I opened my first gym when I was 21 years old, right when I got in the Marines. And I thought I had this great community because we had Christmas parties. I knew these people. And in reality, I just had a lot of friends that ended up paying me money for, working out. It wasn't a community because there was no access point. I didn't manage the out of gym experience. I didn't manage, referrals. I didn't manage, their nutrition the right way. I didn't offer programs beyond just a space to work out. And beyond that, we didn't put on the right events. We didn't do, the activities and the run. There's just so many, think about like joining run groups, meetups, activities, Facebook or chat groups, accountability, competition, so many things that build an active community. I never did in a really systematic way because I thought that I had it when in reality, I just was really good at hanging out and talking to people.
If you were to just hypothetically guess, what percentage of small gym owners would you put into a lifestyle / not really building a business category?
If you eliminate franchise owners, which is a different thing because they get a format and a model behind it. I mean, the ones that are just the lifestyle side, it has to be 70+%.
I was going to say 70 as well. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's move into kind of what you're seeing now. Let's talk COVID-19, the whole nine. How are you seeing the space change in this moment? And then how do you think that will play out over the next 5+ years based on this massive disruption?
Yeah, the one quote, it's obviously not the exact line, but Rick Stolmeyer, the CEO of MindBody, and like I said, they're an investor and we've become to know them pretty well. Him saying, if there was ever a time in my life that you could tell me that all of the businesses that we have on our platform would close all at once, he would previously said it was humanly impossible. And obviously that happened. So it's an unprecedented situation that we couldn't have prepared for, but what you could have prepared for is diversifying revenue streams and consistent revenue streams outside of the gym. And right now for gyms, I think that it's important that they maintain the communication in the community and the, being out there, making sure that the people see them, whether it's on Instagram or other platforms, text, call. I mean, I just saw that it was funny. I saw online today, the Penguins players, the Pittsburgh Penguins, are calling season ticket holders. Like Sidney Crosby is calling season ticket holders. So if he's going to make the time to call a season ticket holder, why aren't you calling and checking in with your members every single day and being that person and adding value and doing what you can and all of that stuff? So, I mean, it starts with the effort there, putting in the time to engage with them. But you can't make a living off that. That's not something you charge for. That's just you being a good person. Another thing is a lot of gyms you see that right now, the problem with like them still trying to bill or not handling refunds properly and all that stuff. That's another thing. Just do the right thing, and it'll play out in the end. And then the other part is most of these gyms and facilities and places don't think about what you guys do at OPEX, like the out of studio, out of gym training and coaching. And that's something that needs to be implemented. Whether you're a yoga instructor, whether you're own a CrossFit, own an OPEX, whatever it is, you should and could be offering out of studio, out of gym coaching. And that's something that you're seeing people rush to now. And they're rushing to this streaming and this, broadcasting and this, Zoom. That's not it. That's not accountability. That's not engagement. That's just you putting out content and trying to pay for it. And although some consumers are paying for it now, what you're seeing them is almost like philanthropy. They're like paying because they like the instructor and they like the gym. That's not a business. What you need to do is offer something unique, and you cannot compete with Peloton. You cannot compete with Fit On. You can't do that. It's not about the quality of the product. It's you. It's your offering. It's your engagement. It's your caring. So how do you translate that into a product? And that's coaching, accountability, engagement, that true community piece, and bringing everyone together, and then charging a reasonable rate to offer coaching, programming, guidance, whatever that may be. And that needs to start now, and it needs to carry beyond. And you charge an extra whatever a month when you do come back online and you do open up your facilities. And that needs to be your plan going forward, is you need to treat in studio and out of studio the same way. And how do you manage that? And what does that mean? And what does being a coach beyond just showing up for a class and then leaving, what does that mean long term? And those people are going to win, because who knows, with opening back up and guidelines in certain states and people getting sick, or are they scared to go back to the gym? And then more than that, what if this happens again, like they're possibly predicting in the fall?
Every course I went through when I was getting my MBA had some version of, you have to think about how you could potentially be disrupted. And I don't care if you're a small business or a large business. And when I think about gyms, think about how many gyms would have thought, well, if I do something online, I might hurt my in-person business.
Yeah.
And there's businesses across the spectrum, in terms of size, that were worried about that. And then in 24 hours, they all went online. Yeah, I mean, it's like it's unimaginable to think how fast that happened. Do you think, and you sort of mentioned it earlier, but do you think that a lot of gym owners will ultimately close doors, or do you think that they'll try to run, let's call it hybrid, of in-person and online? Because you got to figure for the next at least 12 months, there's got to be some sort of distancing policy in some fashion, because there's no vaccine,
Yeah.
So it's like, if you're the economics of a lot of group gyms went out the window when distancing happened. You can't put as many people in.
They have to, I think they're going to have to change their models. And even then, just because of, it kind of plays back to the passion versus business operation side. They just don't have the money, the planning, the understanding in the bank to fix what they have. Their leases are not great because they didn't understand the square footage, space, and cost, and the markets that they're in and things like that. So that's going to be an issue, and unfortunately, they are going to close. And then there are going to be some that try to compete with the streaming and the digital, and they're going to do it in a way that seems very common sense. I mean, and even like ClassPass and MindBody and all these other, like, they're offering these streaming and Zooms and integrations, and that's not it. I'm not going to pay $30 a class online. That can't be a thing. So that then they're going to be, some of them are going to be hurt there as well. And then it has to be a thoughtful experience that translates to what you do. Like yoga is different than spinning, and run coaches or CrossFit coaches or OPEX or, powerlifting. There's just so many different variations in the fitness business that you need to think about, but it's all about looking at the unique offering that you have, your coaching, your management, your accountability, your programming, your relationships. How do you translate that into outcomes for your members? And then how do you charge for that? And yeah, it's just a whole different world right now. And like you said, some of them were against going digital, and then they rushed to do the wrong end of digital way too fast. So it's just a weird time. And you honestly, you feel for those businesses, but they need to take an approach and think about it as again, like a look at customer acquisition costs for your customers now and in the future. Let's say you can't have everyone come back into the gym, or when you do, you can only have a third of the members at one time in each class. How do you still make the revenue? How do you still manage the bills? How do you still do that? And it's going to be coming with actual models around what you need to do, what the costs are, what you're paying to keep these people, stuff like that, which I don't think a lot of them are looking at.
Yeah, it makes me think about, and I know we've probably had this conversation over the years, but I remember when I was getting ready to sell the gyms in 2014, I had a conversation with somebody about the economic profit is starting to go down in CrossFit. And every business that matures, or every sector that matures, the economic profit has to become harder and harder to get. And I think that the virus certainly disrupted all kinds of things, but many, many, many micro gyms were not very profitable before the virus. And I think that this is kind of like overnight, economic profit just went to zero. And unless you have something unique or a competitive advantage, or you have a great influencer capacity in a local market, you can't, to your point, Anthony, you cannot compete with Peloton because they're doing $40 a month, not $40 a class.
You're so right. And it comes across not just the fitness space, but all aspects. All this did was shine a light on a lot of poorly run businesses and things that were not set up, layoffs happening days after this happened. Obviously, it's not because of the virus. It can't be 3 days after when you lay off, 90% of your staff. It can't be because of the virus, because you weren't doing something right before. And that's the same thing. And it plays also into, there's just so many aspects of what this meant for fitness businesses, where your locations were, what your rents were, what your costs were, what your investment in equipment was. Why did you do it that way? Do you own the building or property? Like, there's just so many lines that go beyond owning the business from a purely pay in to come to a gym or a class and leave. But you're seeing it also, it's also just kind of a luck thing. If companies like ClassPass, MindBody, Orange Theory, F45, if those are struggling so hard, how can a business that is, a local thing that's no startup money, no investment, how are they doing it? Like, I know of some people that just expanded. They were killing it, dominating, they're growing. They just signed a new lease on a much bigger space. That's just also just kind of a luck thing, and that sucks as well. And you hope that they can find a way to overcome that. But the fitness landscape will look much different after this. Obviously, everybody knows that, but I don't think it's much different in terms of just how many are open or closed and how you run your businesses. I think the value to the consumer and the way we look at it, because we are in such a growth phase where, in New York, other cities, even in the Pittsburgh area, a yoga studio for no other reason than being yoga could pop up and sustain itself, or a spin studio just because it's there and it's popular. But when the economy is down a little bit and things are different, I think it's going to be just what is your value proposition? It has to be beyond the basics, and what is your business model? It can't just be money in, money out. This is what it's going to be because, fitness is fitness.
Yeah, I think you're so right on that. It's like, if we think about kind of the later entrance, and one of the ones that pops up to me, which is so interesting, is, and they're not later initially, but to scale out into bigger markets, is Barry's, right?
Yeah.
Barry's is such an interesting story. I'm hearing that they're just doing live classes and people are paying basically through a live session online, but they can do that because of the influence of the instructors. So but to your point, I don't think that lasts forever by any means.
No.
But I think it's interesting that a lot of gym models are going to be found out for not having a competitive advantage. And those are the ones they will have to go to zero, because now the economics, particularly of group fitness, are no good for the next year if you don't have other offerings. So
you mentioned Barry's. If you look at, I just shared, it was in the other newsletter, I shared it on LinkedIn somewhere. They are charging $250 a month or some number like that for their online fitness classes. And Barry's has raised venture capital, private equity. They are in, they are one of the bigger, well-known brands in these markets, and they are, still struggling, obviously. But even more than that, they're charging that price. I don't know how that's going to work, but
yeah.
but like even that, like, I mean, F45 is another one. Mark Wahlberg, celebrity status, massive scale. I mean, what does this mean for their locations, and what was their true profitability per location, per franchisee, and how are they able to stay open, and what are they doing to support them?
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with, Orange Theory or Exponential. I haven't heard too much from the owner or the, franchisee side. Like, I don't know what they're doing to support them. So are they going to be around, and how does that translate into, and if they're not doing well, how do you expect the other ones to do well?
Yeah.
So yeah, like you said, it's just a different model. And beyond that, so many businesses were reliant on ClassPass to drive new revenue or revenue consistently. And their revenue per student, whatever the number may be, is low compared to the actual model of what the revenue should be per student. And that worked because you had 30 people in the class and it was packed. Regardless of if tomorrow everybody opened back up and said, get back to work, get back to business, get back to gyms, it's not safe to have 30 people packed in a small room anymore.
No, not at all.
So are you going to even use ClassPass, or are you just going to take the members that you have and take full rate? Because do you want $10 per student or 25 or whatever the price may be, or monthly commitments? So does that entire business go out? And that has, for better or worse, it has become a massive platform for the studio space. So what does that mean?
I hadn't thought about this until right now. If you are a larger group training facility that truly demands and needs a lot of new clients per month, can you build your model off of needing an outside source like ClassPass? That sounds super risky to me.
There was an article that came out in Vice not too long ago. I don't know if I shared it with you or not. We put it in the newsletter, but it broke down why, like, all of these different gyms complaining about ClassPass and why it didn't work, and how over time they continually, and you drove down the value, commoditized fitness, paid them less and less, and the gyms become more and more reliant on ClassPass.
Right.
But it's a VC propped up model because they weren't profitable. The unit economics didn't make sense, and the scale of what they were offering to the students didn't make sense either. It didn't make sense for the gyms. It didn't make sense for them. It didn't make sense for the students. So there was this whole thing, and they become such a big, important factor of the space that you became reliant on them. And what does that mean now? Our entire businesses that were generating, between 30 and 70+% of their revenue between ClassPass, what do they do?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I could be totally off here, so just call me on any bullshit that you sense in this. But it makes me think about debt. Like, ClassPass reminds me of, and not ClassPass the company, but the idea of that.
Yeah,
reminds me of debt, in that if you structure it out and think about it very intelligently, and you take on a debt structure that makes sense to get going, I love it. But the second that you have to keep coming back for more and more and more debt, and I get commercial paper and all kinds of stuff, right? But if the more debt you take on just to keep your head above water, ultimately that interest is going to eat you up. At some point, you can't maintain that. And I wonder if a client acquisition model like that is ultimately just a debt vehicle, like with just a different umbrella over it. You know what I mean? It's like, if you have to rely on that stuff, you can't survive on that over time, because, like you're saying, the unit economics get worse over time. It's like they can't get better because ClassPass is agnostic. There's going to be more studios and whatever, and so it's going to be more expensive for you to acquire. Wow, I've never thought of it that way.
You and I went through this owning gyms at the time that we did, because Groupon fit whatever that plan was. We used to talk about it back then, even it doesn't make sense. Not only that, it now ClassPass, and this isn't talking bad against them, because they've done a ton in this space, and they've really stepped up post-COVID to do certain things. But if you look at it from purely business, no emotion involved, what they're offering devalues the overall price of fitness in the eyes of the consumer and pays the gyms less. And it's done that propped up by, venture and private equity money. And if that's the case, when the lean model of what is happening right now is going on, it just doesn't make sense. Not only that, there were certain things that they did in the background that, you truly didn't consume. You didn't become a consumer of one specific gym. You stayed on ClassPass and jumped around.
Yeah.
And the model was originally, and at least with Groupon, you would get them in the door and like they could stay with you or not, whatever that may be. And even then, I remember seeing 10% of the leads we got and the people that would buy our class that through Groupon would stay. And even then, they didn't. They always had this whole pricing issue, and it never made sense. So it stayed that way. And what do you do now? Not even if you couldn't keep them as leads, you were relying on the ClassPass revenue, and that revenue stopped immediately. And will it start back up, and to what level? Mm-hmm. And can you take, now that you can only have 15 instead of 30, can you take X amount % less per student? Your revenue per student or athlete is way more important post COVID if you open back up, and your out of studio revenue is way more important. And yes, they are free because you don't pay for ClassPass. And that's what the winning proposition for ClassPass was. Hey, gyms, you don't pay us to acquire you members, but you do pay them. Yeah. Because your overall revenue, that the space in that class should be filled per X. And the price that you're filling it at, if it's not X, is a cost. Mm-hmm. And that's what you're looking at. And businesses, Fit is trying to compete in that space. We haven't done it yet because we haven't added the transactional revenue yet, but we want to. Zenres is another one that's doing well in that space. MindBody's trying to with their acquisition of Limber and their dynamic pricing and others. Everybody's been trying to find this kind of, magic bullet of how do you get people to gyms and get them to be acquired as consumers. But in reality, it's on the gyms. If I today stood up a CrossFit gym or an OPEX or a yoga studio or a spin studio, my marketing strategy, my acquisition strategy, my retention strategy, it should have nothing to do with ClassPass or others. That could be an additive, sometimes, but it should not rely on that. And the thing that you could rely on, if your programming is good and your space is good and your brand is good and all of those things that you do, it's community engagement. How do you get out there and talk to people? Posting online, posting on, it's the same thing that we did when everyone would talk about us opening our gym or you guys opening yours. Posting on Craigslist, going door to door, not, going to events, setting up at health expos, holding free run groups, holding free workouts in the park, holding free competition, offering referrals and price, discounts for people that bring other people in and sign up, things like that. Like if you did that, you don't need to rely on those other things. Yeah. It's just a harder task.
Which, God, that just makes me think about the debt piece again, because if you have to rely on those other things, it means that you've built a business with too big of a capacity for what you can put inside of it. And at some point, you can't sustain that unless you build systems, processes, marketing engines internally that can sustain it. Because if anything happens externally to a ClassPass model, you don't get those leads in, you just dump out at that point. But then it's like we come back to the beginning of the conversation and say 70% of people are building lifestyle businesses, and then you go, so there's this big market in fitness that's going after folks that are like, I like this thing, but I don't necessarily want to do the hustling. And I'm not judging why they don't want to do it, but if you don't do that hustling, then somebody's got to pick it up for you, or else you lose money in the deal.
And all of this, is towards the line of like things that are negative, but in the positive is if you approach it in the right way and you have a business model, which I haven't looked in a long time, but if there's somebody out there that's selling a true financial model for gyms, if that doesn't exist, we need to create it, because that understanding and the marketing strategy around, especially Facebook. Now, the good thing is, so post-COVID, Facebook prices, Google SEM prices, like paid marketing listing prices on Google and other channels, the prices are down drastically.
Yep.
Also, do you have a newsletter that you send out? Do you have like certain things that you do? If you're capitalizing on the down prices and you have your marketing and your content marketing strategy out the right way, and you're doing those things, when things do come back online, you have a massive opportunity at a much different cost to reevaluate how you do business. And it's not hard. It's not complicated. I am not I mean, from our conversations, I will say first, things when I talk to people from a business financial side, like a numbers game financial model, I'm not the best at that. We pay people to do that, or we have smart people that are friends of ours help us do those models, because it's not something that I'm not skilled at. I never went to school for it. I never understood it. But I had to, and I learned through it. And that's something that, a lot of people are probably in that position. They're just building out a financial model makes them want to run through, put their head through a play class window. Like, it's just miserable, but you have to do it if you're going to look at these businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And now is the time to restructure and change how you do that.
Yep.
And that's the positive of all this, is people that are truly committed to running good businesses, that are truly committed to their members, that are truly committed to the space of improving people's lives, which I think most people join the space for because they think they have a good offering, and they want to participate in people's health and fitness. If you approach it in a unique way right now, and you do the right things, and you check all the boxes, you can survive.
Mm-hmm.
And come out positive from all of this.
Yeah, I keep going back to, I chatted with Sean Greeley a week ago, and he just said something that was just so simple. He goes, you have to increase your value and decrease your barrier of entry. And he's like, you decide what that means. It's like, that's a good statement, but I think that some people feel so uncertain or emotional in this moment that they're just, grasping at all kinds of different lifelines out there. And I think that there needs to be a plan. So to your point, maybe it's not a complex financial model where somebody starts. Maybe it's just, what is a business that I can create interest from my current client base? And then let's start to move out from there. Yes, the economics have to make sense, but if you don't have an offering that people can use or want to use, the economics don't even matter.
Yeah. And it's just shining a light on things that, might have been propped up by other scenarios. It didn't make sense. Also, talking about the other side of it, those businesses that aren't going to survive or choose not to survive, or things that are changing that way, there's another opportunity for people to come in and open up spaces with a different model or a better model in those areas. Mm-hmm. Which I'm not saying profit off of people's lives, being hurt, but that's something that is going to be available as well. Both with, I guarantee these franchise businesses are going to be resold if people have to close those locations, and those licenses are going to be resold, and those types of things. So I think they will survive. And the one thing that I see is a positive for your space, OPEX, the strength and conditioning, the powerlifting, the CrossFit side. They have an opportunity more than any of the businesses mentioned for coaching and nutrition and programming and offerings out of the brick and mortar location. Mm-hmm. So if that is something that, if they evaluate it properly and they put in channels that help them, like, True Coach is one, online programming. There's so many softwares out there that help people do this. But if they think about that and they really put a method behind that, and they don't eliminate their need for a gym, but they can, like a buddy of mine, Casey Williams, from Moon, we went to high school together. He's a, powerlifting athlete, coach, really well known in his space. He has coaches that he just does online. He doesn't have a gym. He used to own a gym, but he doesn't anymore. And it wasn't because of anything COVID related. It was just, he changed his mind on what he was doing. And he coaches people, and they have basement setups and in gyms and whatever. And he eventually wants to open another space, but he makes a living off of coaching people online. And him online existed when he had a gym, and it existed when he didn't have a gym. So it doesn't change your model of what you offer. And it actually lets you expand beyond the current, place that you're in. There are so many people that are unhealthy, that don't work out, that don't train, that don't do certain things. So you're not competing. I think there was we used to say this all the time. It's why we went door to door when we first opened our gym, because all the people would jump from this gym to that gym, and the healthy people would go around, and CrossFit, especially, like the athletes here would jump to this gym here, this coach here, this place there. But if you just got every person that lived in your area to work out with you, like within your, zip code or whatever it is, that is feasible to work out because they are healthy enough to move and train. If you got them to come to your gym, you would never be able to, satisfy the need of those people. Yeah. Just in your small area. So don't focus on this massive scale of competition. Get the people around you, offer product, be committed, drive their interest in their engagement, and keep them on board. And you'll make more than enough money, let alone if you scale beyond your scope of where you live.
Yeah, we're telling people the same idea, even if they go remote. We've seen the remote coaching game for a lot of years, and a lot of people actually don't like remote coaching. I think that's important to say. So if you are a coach, don't go all in on remote coaching until you've tried it for a little bit. And I mean writing individual programs for people, not just templating and whatever. But I think there's an interesting opportunity for people to go local remote, because to your earlier point, they can do events and they can have get-togethers and they can create a bit of a camaraderie in their local area without necessarily needing a bigger space. So maybe they have a very small space, they're doing a lot online, but they can have people come into the gym twice a week, something like that. But the numbers maybe only need to be 8 to 15 people in the gym, but that's unbelievable economics for, the number of clients that are being coached. That's kind of what's worked. We lucked out on the OPEX side because we had one-to-one that easily transitioned online. So I'm not saying we were we had it figured out. Our model allowed us to not lose relationships. That was the key. But I think, most of our gyms don't need to have more than 15 people on the floor at any given time throughout the day, but they make a nice dollar amount per month, and coaches make good dollars per month because they get percentage of revenue, and they can scale out a little bit if they have a remote interest, right? Not everybody.
And
So
it's an aspect of revenue that's not obviously the full thing. Like you said, it's not all, and some people, whether it's consumers or coaches, don't want to do it, but it's something you have to offer. And you don't even have to think about it as remote coaching as much as like just the, accountability and out of studio experience, even that you have. Like I said, for yoga, that's something that I think right now that yoga instructors and facilities could do very well with programming. And it's also thinking, in yoga, you can go and go through the training and instructor training, and like that's a way to build on revenue. Or there's just so many things you could do, but you have to get unique within your kind of category of fitness and how you're offering these things. But it's there. It's just taking some, creative thought around what's going on and how do you change it. And the space as a whole is going to change because, Peloton stock is up, and what are they doing and how are they growing? But how many people want and can afford and have the space for their equipment? For example, me personally, we have a rower and, kettlebells and things like that. But when I can go outside and go to a gym, I haven't gone to a gym in a long time because I used to own them and I hate going to them. But now that I wasn't able to go and I've been stuck inside, when I can go to a gym and it's healthy and it's an option, man, I'm not going to be home at all. I'm going to be at coffee shops, I'm going to be at restaurants, I'm going to be at gyms. I'm never going to be home. Mm-hmm. And it really changed my perspective. So yes, the value of a Peloton and other things is there, but I mean, I don't think it's that long lived of like it being that valuable, because I want to experience those things. And it also translates to, if I own these facilities and I own these brands, the out of studio experience in, outside meetups, run groups, activities, events, other things, like that's something that's so important that I've been preaching for the past 10 years since we've had our gym, that out of studio experiences that aren't like remote coaching, but meetups and activities and things you can do outside are so important to build, acquisition and retention and engagement and all that stuff.
Yeah, if even Peloton, even as big or as good as they are, that business will start to mature and the economic profit will get lower. So whatever company in that space can have the best brand and probably the best retention strategy and also the lowest cost structure, you know what I mean? So it's like, how far can you kind of push that envelope down? I think that's what a lot of analysts have always said about the whole space is what happens, once the bike is paid off. Because, and keep in mind, Peloton's now going to non-equipment based streaming as well. So it's like, okay, well, if I had a bike owner that was going to pay me for 3 years, and now I've got month to month where I've got to renew them every single month, and I get that it's an auto renew, but still, you're going to have to keep people engaged a lot, or else they'll just find the other streaming service, right? Or some free person on YouTube, right? It's like there has to be relationship somehow in this model.
And that's why we like the keep going back. I probably said it way too many times, but the accountability side of like the management, people like that. That's always an upgrade. And who knows to compete? Joe and I are working on a concept right now about Apple and what they're going to do. There's all this talk around them in the fitness space and what they're going to do. I have a pretty crazy, I think they're going to do what they did with Apple Music and this Apple Arcade, which is the way they're handling gaming, where you can pay a monthly subscription and do all these different games. I think they're going to do something like that for fitness, because they already have Apple TV and Apple TV Plus, and they're producing content, and they can deliver on the TV and the phone, computer, whatever. I think they're going to do that same way. If I pay Apple a monthly subscription, I mean, obviously the watch as well, I can use their services, and their fitness services are yoga, all of these different, aspects, and who knows who they're going to buy to do that. That's my prediction.
Mm-hmm.
But then what happens to Peloton then if Apple's competing?
Well, I think Amazon as well. People have been talking about Amazon coming out with the fitness product. I mean, and they already have Amazon Prime. I've been talking about this idea for months that, bigger companies are creating Prime ideas because they have an underlying business model that makes money based off of human beings, not just based off of something like a fitness outcome. So let's say Amazon Prime now has all the streaming fitness content, etc., and they don't need to make money on it. Exactly. You know what I mean? Like, it's just part of the Prime to keep all the eyeballs, so that, it's fascinating to think about that stuff.
And if you think about, like, for fitness, for example, there's categories. So obviously the fitness is on YouTube and it is a platform, but there could be a standalone video platform that is just fitness. Mm-hmm. That is like the YouTube. What happens there? If fitness becomes like other content where people want to buy it, one day Apple wants to buy the rights to your fitness programming, and Netflix wants to buy the rights to your fitness programming, and so on. And you as a coach and a trainer, that's your value, is your programming and your offering and your appearance and all the other things that go into make you who you are. Who's buying that programming? Are there studios that stand up now? And kind of like there are with influencers, like influencers and coaches now have managers that get you on the different things. So I think there's so much left in the fitness space. If you look at technology and content and, video and music, if you look at what's happened in so many other industries, I think there's so much left to be changed in the fitness space because it's still so early. And the people that are driving the fitness space are, the wealthy investors and VCs and PE firms and all these people that buy into fitness and prop it up. But do they truly understand the outcomes and understanding of it? Have they ever coached a class? Have they ever run a gym? I would say probably not. So if that's the case, that's why I think there's still so much left to be done. And there's a ton of opportunity for coaches, owners, trainers, business owners, franchise, whatever it is, to, evaluate the space, make a true plan, and maybe they invent the next thing or build the next thing or come up with the next program that scales. I mean, you and I have talked as far as that all the way to how the insurance space of training and fitness, as well as the coaching and the certification space, all of it needs to and can change.
Yep. Well said, man. Let's call it there. I'd love to do this again, and especially when Carl and I start doing the live shows, and we'd love to come up to Pittsburgh and have you guys on. But I appreciate you coming on today, man. It's always just really fun talking to you about all this stuff. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Sorry, I probably got way too excited and rambled for a while, but this space is fun and it's good to talk about this stuff. And I'm glad someone like you is leading the way on talking about this.
No, it's great. So where can they find you guys? What's the best spot for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, insider.fit.co is the Fit Insider site, which has the podcast that Joe hosts, the newsletter we send out, and all the content. And then just fit.co is the consumer site where they can kind of jump around. And personally, I share the most on LinkedIn. It's where I'm always sharing the content that's out there. So any of those places, and they can just hit us up and have a chat if they want to.
Awesome. Thanks, Anthony. Appreciate it.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.